All right, thank you. Yeah, you guys see behavior design fundamentals?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Presenting now. Hopefully it still works. Oh, did did you log back in? Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah, I think today. I mean, well, Iris has said she won't make it. She's having a family event get together, so we're good to go. Yeah, we are in class 11, guys, and quickly do your tech check. And today, definitely have some writing material, paper, post-its, whatever your weapon of choice, digital could be around because we're going to do some work. Um, yes. So I think the big takeaway from last time's kind of surprise pop quiz um, was that there is a lot of theory that this course has gone into, and clearly in the next two classes, I plan to do more based on those topics. And it's starting to stick, which was nice. There were some good guesses and a very, very good conversation. But I think the big takeaway for me for the as the course designer was what Sia said when she said, "How about giving us some frameworks and tools that will help on the practical side?" And I said, well, that not only was that her point, but a few others also made that kind of point, kind of came out. And I thought, yeah, let's solve that problem once and for all and dedicate this class to that. So, at the cost of reducing a little bit of theory on diversity and behavior at scale, uh, both the next two classes, which I will try to basically, we have two classes left after this one because I'm doing one extra. This is class 11. In the 12th class, I will give theory on both diversity and behavior at scale. And we will continue with the workshopping, which we start today. And in the 12th, 13th class also, we will do mostly workshopping. So today we're not going to do, we're basically not touching any theory at all. We're just touching on some old theory, but today we're just going to workshop and do uh, behavior design. And the reason for this is just to, first of all, of course, get you guys like working on a behavior change intervention the way you would in the real world, like any project, get you hands-on into that, which you're already familiar with, but to clarify that process, make it crystal clear how we do it, and to remove this sort of confusion about do we have methods? Do we know processes? I, I wouldn't want you to doubt your own competence or your own ability in being able to do that. So that's the goal today. So it's a very like relaxed class in the sense that it's just doing hands-on stuff. Again, like if we did a real workshop or brainstorm, we would have to go into lots more detail. We would have lots of user insight. We would have a real case and so on, but we won't be taking it that seriously because we don't have all the data. We'll be doing it fairly lightly in a relaxed way, but we'll be using our gray cells and we will think really deeply about the process so that that question is forever resolved. Does that sound good? And just stop me again as usual, wherever you like. Okay, so there are lots and lots of processes and models um, and methods out there, but I would like to go today into the behavior design canvas, my own approach, which I've crystallized based on studying all of these, in which I continue to validate when I see a new framework. I check if the behavior design canvas is standing up to it. Does it have any major flaws? And so far, for me, it's stood the test of time. And I think that if you understand one process really well, then you yourself can in the future adapt it, or you can create your own or follow something else. So today we'll just go into what the process is. That we'll talk a little bit about process and get quickly into the canvas. And from there we'll take we have three cases that we can possibly do, but I think even just doing one fully would be an achievement, or we would be doing quite well. But I want to quickly go to the other cases as well, just to show you some diversity, or really how much diversity there can be. Okay, we have pretty much everything today except for experiment reviews and data scans, very hands-on. We are touching on some theory as well, of course, because we can't do without it. Great. So the two things that you really need when you're designing for behavior change as a practitioner at a very, very high and simple level is you need tools and you need a process, right? This is, and the work happens at the intersection of that. So every time you're starting I think this is also true for design, isn't it? And design thinking or whatever you guys do. I think you need to say, well, do I have a chosen set of tools which get the job done? And do I have a clear process which I can repeat, iterate, and keep, doing over and over? Because it's a method. There's a certain method to the madness, as they say. Repeating that till you get a certain quality of results. Okay. These are the two things. Now, when it comes to the tools, that's basically what we've been doing till now. All of those theories in each of those classes, we did touch on some process, but what you should consider that, what you've covered so far, you should consider them basically as your tools. And your tools will always be the theories. They will always be the models, right? They will always be these kind of pockets of knowledge, which may come from your own experience as well. But really, they are the accepted theory, would be the core of it. So when you think of tools, think of your bag of theories, models, and frameworks that you have, right? And there's a subtle distinction, because a process can also be a framework. And the one word that kind of sits between tools and processes is the word framework, because you can have a framework for a process and you can have a tool that's a framework. But let's be clear about this. So you have now basically a bag of tools just like this, and it's in some kind of order, but they're all just sitting there. And you kind of understand each one to some degree. And as you carry on in your career, you'll understand it much more. You'll get to know the tool much more, whether it's triggers or nudging, gamification, motivation. You will understand these deeper and deeper as you use them, just like physical tools. But what you don't have is a methodology. You don't have a process, a step-by-step approach as to how to use these tools to create behavioral interventions. That's the second half that we will go into today. You don't have this, right? And you don't have a way to go back and think, why did I come here in this process? What can I change? What happens if I change something? And more importantly, how are all these pieces related? Great. So an interesting thing about process and tools is that typically it seems like the process is a little bit meta. I think in design thinking also we somehow, it's not a mistake, but we tend to think like that the process is the big thing and the tools happen somehow inside it, or the process, somehow more is larger. But actually, if you think of the simple metaphor, when you change the tool, as in the difference between the left and the right images, your whole process can absolutely change. So never underestimate the power of a good tool. Understanding motivation better, understanding any of those topics better. When you say, why so much theory? Because you can never make a tool, you can always make a tool better. You can never stop with how good a tool can be. You can always even change the tool and make it bring in something entirely new, which will entirely change how you approach the work itself. So you constantly have to, develop both these. And that's why never underestimate your tools. But having said that, of course, having a first process, having a framework is really, really important, because if you didn't know what to do in what sequence, then you'd be stuck. You'd be not able to go anywhere. So to Sia's point, and to the general request, we're focusing now on the process that we have that's actually come out from all these tools. So the behavior design canvas is, I was unsatisfied with anything that I saw, and I just had a particular process that I began to follow. And in a certain way, these tools made sense to me. So I said, why don't I create a bottom-up, um, very inclusive, very synthetic kind of a process, which is the canvas. Okay. And so basically all these tools and a lot more actually, which you've learned and which you could learn, can actually fit into this canvas. And if at any point the canvas doesn't scale or it doesn't fit something that you have found and you're like, but this canvas doesn't cover it, I would love to know about it, because it's just a living framework. I would like to improve it. I would like to advance it, even change it if necessary. There are already a few interesting like issues, not issues, but like improvements that can be made, which I'll try to go into today. Okay, so, it's sensible to start with one process first and disrupt it before moving on to something else. I said that first. So I would really prefer that you internalize the behavior design canvas. And essentially the canvas looks huge and there's all this stuff, but actually it's a very simple set of thinking, thought steps. And nowadays, when I think about behavior at all, not even behavior change, not even behavioral interventions, when I just think about behavior, I think in terms of the canvas. I have internalized it. And that way I also constantly stress test it and I see if it's holding up. All right. Any questions on that before I jump into the canvas itself? Okay, just stop me, huh? So just to refresh you and kind of get you activated a bit, any thoughts on why we call these things behavioral interventions? You've heard the term behavioral intervention, so could you say a few words about it and why that word, how that word makes sense to you?
For me, intervention is always like, it's the small change that you can do now instead of trying to change something big in terms of behavior, if it makes sense. But it's the best way I could explain it.
No, that's. I mean, there's many ways to interpret it, and I think that's a really interesting and cool interpretation. A small change you can make now, which has large impacts later. You're talking about the scale of the intervention and its impact, consecutive impact.
No, I guess what I'm talking about is intervention is some kind of almost like an experiment that you would run to see what changes if your behavior tactics kind of pay off. But say that's why we don't call it behavior change or some kind of behavior. I don't know, like some bigger word, right? Intervention is just let's try to change this at this point.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, I think that's a really good definition, and that's the spirit of what we are going for. Any more thoughts or different viewpoints on intervention?
Could one say that the intervention points you to on the right path and try to reduces the negative impacts of, or reduce the negative like behavior, or the reduces how could you say that, like they reduce the negative impact on your behavior and points you to into the right direction.
Yeah, that's also there's an ethical dimension to what you said, Philip. And surely intervention should, if intervention is commonly understood to be that way, it would be amazing. In general, intervention, the word doesn't have that ethical element built into it. It could be not a very good thing or not necessarily the right thing. It's essentially just an element of behavior change. So it's an event that triggers behavior change, but that it should ideally be what you said. And that's what we would like to definitely do. I mean, we would like to do right interventions and right for the person who's doing the behavior, not for us, right? So
I'll take a stab at a
go for it.
definition.
Mhm.
To me, an intervention, behavioral intervention is someone's behavior is going in a certain direction.
Mhm.
And the intervention is this external, I guess, force that comes in to change their current trajectory, their current behaviors to another behavior.
You nailed it. You nailed it, bro. Totally. Let me give you the visual. There you go. Right? That's exactly what I was going for. And it has all these elements of what the other guys said, as in there needs to be some logic to it being right, being healthy, being necessary, being important, being useful, being valuable for the user. If you're sending the user off into the desert to like dehydrate, that's not a great intervention. Unfortunately, the visual doesn't show where the road goes, but it needs to be beneficial for sure. And it needs to be a small change or a, like Sia said, a tactical kind of intervention in the moment, which has consequences on behavior. But I think the big thing I'm going for here is that the spirit of exactly what Jamie said, which is the user is already doing something. They are in a certain flow, they're on a certain path. And this is life. This is when you think of the word intervention, always consider that you're trying to fit into a moving, fit to a moving target. Your user is already doing something. And that's something that I think a lot of behavior change people, or definitely non-behavior change people, they don't think about it. They don't consider the fact that you're actually trying to intervene on a moving target. The user is not sitting there on a couch waiting for you. Even if they're sitting on a couch, they're doing something. They're not sitting there just waiting for you in vacuum to come in and change their behavior. And that's why it's behavior change, isn't it? So that's the key thing there, just to be very clear that we are changing current behavior, right? Okay, so if we are changing current behavior or changing behavior by designing interventions, then what would be the first step, do you think? What would be our first step in the process? I'm just trying to get you guys to think a bit instead of just giving you all the stuff.
Probably like understanding, identifying the current behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great point.
Determining the reasoning behind the behavior, the certain behavior.
Yes, that's also a good point. I guess the one word I'm just looking for basically is, the really simple word I'm looking for is target. So, and that's the first stage of the canvas too. So behavioral targeting at a meta level covers both those things. Well, the reasoning why something is happening is something that happens in the next stage of the canvas, according to the canvas. But as we will see, there is, you have a process, but you don't necessarily have to always start with the first step. But ideally, let's learn it, in a step-by-step way. And I'll also go into why it gets a bit like dynamic. But really the first step of targeting, of doing anything called a behavioral intervention, if you're designing a behavioral intervention, which is the practical side of all this, isn't it? We're not just talking about the theory of behavior or the reasons for behavior. We are talking about changing behavior as behavior designers. We want to design behavior. Then the first thing we need to be very, very clear about, and the first step of the canvas, is to target the behavior. Targeting happens in a simple way by mapping what the present behavior is in that flow of life or sleep or sitting on the couch or whatever, wherever the user is. What is the current behavior that they are doing? And what is the desired target behavior that we would like them to do? right? That's the key first step. And there's a lot of different inputs you can put to get to this, to get very clear with this first step. It seems very simple, but to get to the real thing can be a lot of work. It usually is. So some of the things that that you see, some of the things that you kind of see there that kind of are important in these two steps is at the bottom, you obviously have some kind of a goal for your project. You have some kind of a business model, delivery model, impact model. You have some intentions for why you want to change behavior as a stakeholder. Then you're also interested in understanding the change itself, right? And user insight becomes really, really critical down there. Individual differences and diversity is something that's relevant across. I'll go into that later. But let's do some behavioral targeting, right? Now, before I go to the audible example, I just wanted to say that user insight is like super, super important. And in that sense, that's why it's a design canvas, right? Because we are very much doing a design process here. So a few tips on starting your process. First step is target. You need to target the behavior. In that you have two pieces, present and desired behavior. You want to map against them. Now, remember BJ Fogg's Purple Path Guide and the fact that behavioral change is about starting, stopping, or continuing behaviors. And this is an interesting thing which a lot of behavior change work, again, doesn't tend to notice. But for example, if you want to start a new behavior, you obviously will have your desired behavior first, because you already know what you want the user to do. This could be drinking water, going for a run, working, sleeping, whatever, right? Long list of stuff. The user doesn't do something, now you want them to do that thing. So then your first fixed data point is on the desired behavior side. Basically, what you're doing here is you're taking some present behavior, which we don't know right now, but we're trying to hack that or disrupt it, turn it into the desired behavior. This could be, especially in the case of digital, that's what I think is the meaning of disruption. It's not technological disruption, it's behavioral disruption. Things like get people to order food using an app, get people to use a cab service, get people to do this or that or the other, order movies online, shift to remote work, whatever have you, right? We know the desired behavior first. Great. But if you're trying to stop a behavior, then obviously you know the current behavior better. You do not know the desired behavior so much, because you want someone to stop smoking, you want someone to stop being late, late to bed. You want someone to do something else, stop something else, maybe even stop a different certain work process. If your organization has a new process, you want to stop something. Any of these things you want people to stop, then it is something they currently do, and therefore you know the present behavior better. And your creativity is about how you generate desired behaviors. So that's a little tricky with behavior changes, like just knowing where to start. First thing, target the behavior very clearly. Second, and this is theoretically, we are just doing it as an exercise, right? You're trying to target the behavior, you're being very clear whether you're picking a present behavior that you want to stop or continue, or you're picking a desired behavior that you want people to do, which they don't do currently, right? Is that simple and clear so far? Okay. So that's where the user insight becomes very, very useful. Obviously, you can easily imagine that if we were doing this for one of your projects, we'd probably have some way to model your users. You could look at analytics like we're doing in Tom's case. We don't have personas. We don't have, we don't have flesh and blood kind of understanding of users, but we do understand their behavior on the app. So that's our source for user insight. You could have personas, you could have archetypes, you could interview real users, you could do some focus groups. Whatever way you have of generating user insights becomes really, really like critical, because then you know what their flow of life is and where you want to create that intervention, and whether you want to stop them from doing what they're doing, continue what they're doing, or then start something new. Right? You need to have that context. So user insight becomes really critical. And the more you come up with those behaviors, the better you understand users. You can do further research or further experimentation, as Philip suggested, and the process starts becoming cyclical. So just this first block, targeting behavior change, is really, really is really critical, probably the most critical, because you want to get to that. Okay. So I wanted to take up an intervention case, and actually the Audible slide was here. Sorry. You all know Audible. It helps users to purchase and stream audiobooks and other forms of spoken word content. I'm very, very passionate about voice and audio related consumption formats, voice user interfaces, things like Siri, Alexa, whatever. Also things that are heard and can be consumed on books via audio and so on, because it's a really interesting behavior shift, which basically has not happened ever before, right? You had radio, but you never had entire books. You had tapes that sometimes came with books, but now on the go, you can listen to books, and you have all these micro reading services where they offer you 1-minute summaries and so on. So this is a very, very interesting behavior shift that's happening, I think, globally. So I wanted to take this as a case and just play with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the intervention. We're going to look at Audible. We're going to design some behaviors using the canvas. And the user is you, because I didn't think there would be time to present you with a user model and then we all get familiar and understand the model, and there may be gaps in our understanding. I said, you all probably are potential users of Audible. Some of you may be adopters already, others may be agnostics, even others might be, what's the word? You might be kind of resistant to it. You might not want it. So that's all good. You're all potential users. So just treat yourself as the user that you're designing for, and we try to generate some stuff. So I guess the first conversation or rather the first thought reflection that I would like you to have is, if you're targeting a behavior change for Audible, you work for Audible, or you have a consulting gig with Audible, and they're asking you to change behaviors to make business impact, to grow their product. It's a pretty commercial case we're doing here. What would be, to reflect for a few minutes and think about, would you want to start some behaviors, stop some behaviors, or continue behaviors? So take 5 minutes or even 2-3 minutes and put down some thoughts, and we can share them. I guess the one tip about, anyway, we'll go into that, but the more specific you can be, the better off you're going to be in terms of the entire process, specific in terms of the behavior change or the behavior that has to be stopped or continued.
But in which step of like using or considering using Audible are we?
That's a great question. I was going to come to that, but I didn't want to dump all that on you already. So I guess you can be quite free, Philip, and be creative. Yeah, it could be out of your personal experience. You could Google something on Audible quickly if you want to get inspired. It's all good. Okay, great. Let's share. Any ideas? Anyone? Just go for it. What did you write? Go for it, Ines.
I was thinking something, if I was Audible, what I would want my users to start is to maybe share some of the books that they are reading with their social circles or something like this, kind of like a,
You can love it.
yeah.
Absolutely.
book club
Yes.
kind of thing.
Lovely. So share. So you want to start sharing favorite books, right?
Yep.
Okay. Nice. Starting a new behavior. Behavior is very specific. Very good. Any others? We'll pick 2 or 3 to work with. So just feel free to rattle them out.
I have one. I was thinking about myself as a user. I thought that we were supposed to do that, but like I don't listen. I don't currently listen to books at all. Like
Yes.
it would be my first time if I ever begin, in all honesty. But I do read Kindle a lot, which in Kindle is also from Amazon, right? So
Yes.
what I was thinking as continue is if you're a Kindle user, I would like to tap into that somehow. So say if you buy a Kindle book, you would
be more specific. So you are a Kindle user.
So I buy lots of books on Kindle.
Yes.
I don't read them often or don't finish them often simply because you have to sit in one place, right?
Yes.
But it's also that you buy some book, and I don't know if it's your experience, guys, but when I buy books, sometimes I just sit for a year before I even open them. Like
Sure.
It just happens because it's so easy to buy stuff for Kindle. So
Mhm.
if there was an option that Audible went in as kind of alternative option as a bundle for less money, say.
Sia, how do you define a behavior?
Well, doing something,
Yes.
like trying to reach a goal. So for me,
no, it's doing something, right? It's trying to reach a goal is not the exact same thing as doing something, right? You're doing something to reach a goal, but a behavior is just doing something. So what is the behavior you want the user to do?
Well, I mean, in this context, listen to a book, right?
Yes, but connected to, you're going somewhere really valuable with that. You buy a book spontaneously, you don't read it. So how would you define the target behavior there? Listen to books that you have bought within 1 week of purchasing them.
Oh yeah, no, that's very, yeah. That's very precise. But yeah, or for me, it was more like finish the books you start, actually.
Right.
Less than maybe even buy. But yeah.
Finish the books you start, but then, okay, that's also acceptably, that's a great behavior, target behavior. Finish books that you start. What about books that I don't start? Because that is also a problem that you said, that you buy a book, but you don't actually start it to begin with.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. That doesn't bother me as much, I guess, as not finishing after all.
Sounds, that's interesting. Great. And it's keeping it personal. I mean, using yourself as the target user is exactly what we want, because we want the depth of, we want the rich qualitative insight there. We don't want something that's just generic. Okay, finish books you start. I could also add start books that you buy. And but then if you added a certain time frame to it and said start books within a fortnight of buying them, you become even more specific.
Yeah.
See, again, behavior happens on that path, which is time. And generally saying, again, when you say finish books that you start, by when? In 5 years? Is it valuable enough for the user or for Audible? You see? It's hard to measure. So the whole point of behavior design is and the whole point of working with behavior is so that we can measure these things. Measurement happens in a certain time or certain context and time. So the more precise, the better your results will be. Cool, but these are really good. Yes.
Right.
Start books that you bought within a certain time. Okay, I got that. Next, anything else diverse, different from these?
Well, I have this behavior where I'm listening to an audiobook, not on Audible necessarily, but anyway. And then I noticed that I've kind of zoned out and haven't actually been processing anything for like 15 minutes or something. So that's a behavior I'd like to stop somehow.
Wow.
But I'm not sure why Audible would want to do that, because I already bought the book. So
no, Audible would love you to do that because, as we will see later, it delivers value to you. The product is only relevant if it delivers value. It's like, what's the point of buying it if you're not going to consume it, enjoy it, appreciate it? Then you won't have the motivation to adopt that product again or buy another book. So it is absolutely in their interest to make sure that you relish and get value out of the purchase. That's what will make you come back and appreciate their brand. That's a great, really specific behavior change and really hard to do, right? I mean, technically, but I love that. Okay, stop zoning out because I'm sure it happens.
I had exactly the same idea, except mine was stop falling asleep. But
what if you did it so you could fall asleep, Ines?
Even better.
I heard some people do, Great, stop falling asleep. Very nice.
I think it falls in the same category as out. Also, the problem is similar because you have to find kind of where you left off to be able to pick up again.
Wow, this is awesome stuff. We can literally make a case of this and send it to Audible. Yes, pick up where you left off, isn't it? That's the real problem. Because sleeping is a little bit different, in my opinion, from zoning off, because sleep is a function of tiredness. And when you're asleep, when you're sleepy, you should sleep. It's not the best behavior to intervene in. Your body is trying to rest, and if your app keeps forcing you to stay awake, that cannot be very good for you. It can show you listen for a few more minutes, but it's not like you're going to get 2 hours of energy more. So the problem is, how do you resume when you dropped off to sleep? How does the app let you resume seamlessly? And in Tom's case, it's the same behavior change, but it's actually, the reason is quite different. There, he's not actually tired. He just happens to be in a scatterbrain state of mind, or something else has distracted him. So you see, when you get into that one single micro moment, there's a lot going on there that needs to be really understood. And that's the reason you'll see most companies don't yet do behavior design interventions, because it's a special kind of category of work in itself. Great inputs. Any more? We already have a long list. I had a couple. One was start listening while running. So I call it behavioral piggybacking. So if you want to get your behavior to adopt, stick it with something that people already do and enjoy. So you're riding on that motivation. So a lot of people run, they listen to music. Why don't you listen to an audiobook instead? Right? It's marketable, it's doable. The other one I had was bookmark something interesting. So getting people to who already listen, I want them to bookmark, because when you bookmark something, you create what's called stored value. Stored value is anything you put into a software which you have ownership of. And when you do that, your value of the software immediately goes up. You own something inside it, it brings you back, you have retention, you have usage, and so on. It's a self-perpetuating cycle. So I had those two, bookmark and start listening while running. Any more, guys?
Yeah, I got something to add.
Yeah.
So I said to start, well, something interesting with the start and continue is it depends on the person and the behavior. These are sort of, yeah, what needs to be continued for one person needs to be started for another.
Okay.
But I said spending more time with audiobooks, to start spending more time with audiobooks.
Okay.
And you could define what that limit of time is, to see like when. I'm sure there's some point where people get hooked and start like listening and are on a trajectory to form a habit out of it. And listening X amount hours per week.
Yes.
I can measure. And something continue finding times or activities to listen, to pair audiobook with.
Finding activities to pair, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's both of these are slightly meta, isn't it? They are like, they're more like a mission of behavior change, or you have a certain goal or a certain, like a mission. Basically, you're on a mission to get people to spend more time. You're on a mission to get people to continue finding activities. But on the canvas itself, or when you're doing interventions, I think it's obvious that you need to be more specific. Because the problem is, the moment you say, it's not a problem, but basically if you say continue finding activities, the question becomes, what is the present behavior, right? You're talking about a desired behavior, which is pairing it with an activity. Then you're like, okay, so what activity, right? And spending more time with audiobooks. Okay, so what are they currently doing in that time, right? Are they relaxing? Are they studying? Again, you need to get more specific. So, but great ones. I think you're obviously in the right ballpark. So that's the key. These are the tool tips that I kind of put up in a version of the canvas. So I have two versions. One is just the plain vanilla one with just the boxes. And this is the one with the tooltips, which I'll share with you. Actually, you can add more tooltips to this, but the whole point is, what do you look at in each of these boxes? When you look at the present behavior, you need to obviously consider the context very deeply. Context is the place, the time, everything external, right? Well, even internal things like, the motivation of the user and stuff, but we have a whole piece that on the canvas which deals with motivation. But so here we are talking a lot about the external environment. We're talking about the kind of place, the kind of activity they're doing, who they're with, very important. Relational context. Is it at work? Is it at home? Are they alone? Where is the user? That's very important. These are all, you could say, things that will give you clues on making these very strong, making the present and desired behavior really strong. The other thing you want to look at is something called entrenchment. Entrenchment is very specific to digital technology. I'll give you a quick example of entrenchment. So this is my screenshot from Canva. And as I'm building this slide deck, on the left, Canva lets me store images. So you basically drag images there and it just starts to create a nice image repository. So you can reuse those images. You can reuse them across presentations, right? I can open up a new presentation, go to my image folder remains the same, click on an image and boom, it populates that image into my deck. So I just have all my images for the course on the left, and I've built this over time, and I'm starting to label them really well. So I can just search motivation and all the images connected to motivation come up. I can use them wherever I want. See, what's happening here is, because Canva has given me this new process, I am getting more and more entrenched into Canva. I'm shifting away from PowerPoint. I'm shifting away from Keynote, because I'm creating content here which make it smarter, faster, quicker for me to work here. And therefore my behavior is shifting. So an entrenched user is someone whose behaviors, a certain kind of, it could be eating, it could be working, is deeply tied into the features of a tool. Doing those activities has become so embedded to the features of the tool that the user cannot leave anymore, or it's just too costly to leave. Why on earth would I use another tool to make presentations anymore when all my images are here from across all my projects? And the more I use them, the more organized I make these. I start naming them. I start putting them in, they provide folder options. So I'm going to start organizing these by class next, I guess. And once I have that, that's where I'm going to make my presentation. So that it's a complete inversal of how presentation software is designed. Initially, it was all about providing, a blank slate and you could put everything there. Now you put everything there and therefore you go there and you design there. That's an entrenched behavior. So you'll see entrenchment in all kinds of products and services. If you create a Spotify playlist, you start to get more entrenched because that's where your music is. If you create a playlist called Weekend Chill, you're not going to get that list of songs anywhere else. The next time you're chilling on the weekend, Spotify gotcha. You're entrenched. So that's one of the things you need to consider when looking at present behaviors. Are users entrenched somewhere else? What are they currently doing? And is it because they are entrenched somewhere else? Are they entrenched in some software somewhere? Or a workflow could be, or a work process, which they cannot kind of get out of. Because if you can't disrupt that, you won't be able to make the desired behavior change. Okay, the other thing is the workarounds.
So I've got something to add here.
Yeah.
One of the desired behaviors, behaviors to stop watching YouTube, to stop listening to the radio or music,
Sorry,
to stop
Jim,
listening to podcasts.
Stop listening to radio. Stop listening to podcasts. Excuse me, why?
So you can listen. So you can listen to more books.
Beautiful. Does Audible only offer books? Okay.
I don't know. Do they offer something else?
I don't know. I honestly don't know, but that's true. Yeah, sounds great.
In that case, yeah.
So
Could be stop using these other apps,
stop using
platforms,
other forms of content and just
content.
Cool. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, it's certainly an interesting one. I mean, cool. Yeah. I'm just wondering if, if you get people to stop using something, will they? Well, it depends on how we target the desired behavior. So I think it works. It works very well.
They have actually quite an interesting product, which is Audible Sleep.
Oh.
Which is a series of podcasts in which they have some kind of relaxation music before bed, and not only music. I think there are also there's some storytelling in it as well.
So that is specifically for falling asleep.
Because of you guys, I'm exploring Audible, that I've been a customer for quite a few months now, and I had no idea that they have something else than books.
I also quickly looked and I was like, oh, there's a lot going on. Cool. So they're basically targeting Ines there and making it easier for Ines to fall asleep.
Yeah, and actually my Orari
Nice.
also has audio sleep stories within the Ring app.
Cool.
Oh, got it.
Wow, we're gonna have some happily snoozing designers this week. Awesome. So I'll move on because we have a lot of ground to cover. So we looked at present behavior and we looked at desired behavior is, you can again look at so many lenses you can use, so many tools you can use. So this is where the tools which we spoke about start to become useful. It's almost like if I could design a board game of the canvas, I would make the canvas into the board, and I would make all these tools into decks of cards and help you basically pull out a card, and where would you deploy it? Where would you fit it on the canvas? Where would you use it on the canvas? And basically you can use these tools in many different places, and that's what you pick up over time. It's not something that you can kind of get immediately, but you pick it up over time. But some of the go-to tools for me are, in the desired behaviors, I try to see what job the user is trying to accomplish, or what job we would like the user to accomplish using the desired behavior. The other one is what we spoke about, get as micro about the moment as possible, get really specific, because Jamie, reading books on the couch and Jamie listening to podcasts while he's in his yard, or Jamie listening to YouTube or watching YouTube, are three very, very different contexts. So the micro moment in which you're trying to make that behavior change really, really matters. And starting somewhere very concrete will help you target the behavior change much better. And of course, we're trying to look at the span. The span is really it has to do with continuity, right? Is it something you want to continue for a very long period of time? Is it something you want to do once? Is it something you want to do a few times? So taking a COVID vaccine, voting, these are not behaviors that you want to continue periodically for a period of time. It's just something you want users to do once or twice. It's a very clear intervention. But wear a mask is something you want users to do over and over and over again hereafter. So considering that will also help you refine the target behavior very well. Okay, so what I'd like to do is and finally, the other key thing which Philip brought up in the first part, which is behavioral targeting, is if you're thinking like a business, it would also help you to understand where in the growth funnel your users are. I rely on Dave McClure's pirate metrics, as they're called, or the AARRR. That's why they call the pirate metrics. And I rely specifically on this one, where referral comes at the very end. Some funnels have referral first and revenue later. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'd rather like get to revenue quickly. Actually, referral is something that can happen anywhere, but really the process is you acquire users. How do they find you? And I like this language because it's very user-centered. It's not growth-centered. It's from the perspective of the user. How do they find you? That activation, do they have a great first experience? The point that Tom brought up. Not just a great first experience, but a great experience every time. If you don't deliver value and they don't get value out of the product, just buying your product and just sitting on it is useless. It's not going to have long-term business impact. It's not going to create growth. The third, really the key is, retention. Anyone coming and going once. Well, if your goal is to, I don't know, get people to vote, then you don't care so much about retention. Maybe you care for retention on the basis of every 4 years or whenever your election happens. But that event or that intervention, you just care about one time. But generally in business, because this is a business and a growth framework, you really, really care about retention. You want users to come back, have a great first experience, then come back. And then finally, you want in some way to monetize that behavior. It could be data-driven monetization. It could be advertising-based. It could be directly charging the customer, subscriptions, one-time fees, percentages. There's all sorts of monetization models, recurring models, hopefully, where you can make money again and again. And then finally, you want users to spread the product to others. Right? That's the best way to create growth, is to have products that spread automatically from usage. That way you don't have to pour money into the top, into acquisition, because this is the most expensive part in digital, especially. This is the recurring cost right on the top here. Once you've built the product, you just need to scale it. You need more servers, you need more space to store user data and content. Those have the marginal costs come down over time, but every time you need to run marketing campaign, every time you want more eyeballs, you want new users to find you, you need to pour money in from the top. And marketing is just insanely expensive now. Global digital marketing is getting absolutely nuts. It's become impossible for small companies to even try. So you're going to have to figure out viral techniques to spread users. You guys are quite familiar with this, but anyways, so when you look at this funnel, you can say, okay, the desired behavior, I want to figure out what job I want the user to accomplish. What moment, what context is it happening in? Do I want this behavior to happen again and again? And do I, is the user at any one particular point in this journey? So you can get pretty detailed. And clearly, if your goal is retention, then you're working with a different set of behaviors. If your goal is acquisition, you're looking at a different set of behaviors. I almost always use the funnel when I'm designing for behavior change. So that's the bag of tools you have. Now let's see. The other thing is, before we start brainstorming on that, is that you will see that this is where any process becomes a bit more dynamic. Like, even though you're generating desired behaviors, you might come up with something that is related to motivation. You might come up with a trigger that behaviors that users respond to, or some reward that they like. Don't throw them away when you're working on the first part. Just park them, collect those ideas like a nice brainstorming exercise. You can always populate them later. Yeah. So don't discard good ideas, but the focus is on first part, target. Right. So now that you know these, like you have clues on how to look for these things, and you have a few behavior changes that you want, that you just spoke about, I would like you to pick one behavior change that you wrote down and try to create the desired behavior for it. And if it was a desired behavior, try to create the present behavior for it. And of course, you're going to be a little imaginative here, because we don't have, again, use yourself. So you get it's realistic. The insight is realistic. Does that make sense? Great. So let's complete this part and write down your present behavior and your desired behavior, the one thing that you want to focus on. Yeah. That's the exercise. Sorry, that was not the right screen. This is the right screen. Sia, it would be really cool if I could see you as well, if that's okay. Thanks. Just makes me feel like there are people, you know. All right. Anyone have any options to volunteer? Present and desired behavior, please.
Well, I can start.
Go for it.
Well, I focused on the moment that's after you're finishing the book, because I thought maybe it makes most sense to share a book after you have finished it, because you want to share it only if it was something you want to recommend to your friends.
Mm-hmm.
So presently, after you finish a book, you either, I think, close the app and move on to other things, or you browse around and start listening a next one.
You need to pick one, Ines.
Need to pick one. Okay, I'll say close the app and move on to other things.
close the app and move on to other things. Cool. Yeah, it would be even better. Yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. Yeah. Okay. I have something similar to yours actually, so that's interesting.
And then the desired behavior is that after finishing the book, you would share it with through social media with your friends.
Just share it at the moment.
Okay.
Because yeah, I guess you could put that down, share it through social media, but we could also assume that the app itself has a mechanism for sharing directly through the app or something. But you're probably right. Yeah, sounds good. Okay, yeah, because it would need to go somewhere, at least on WhatsApp or whatever, email, to be able to share it. But it depends on the design of the product. But yeah, that's good. That's great. Okay. Anyone else?
Maybe I can. I chose as a desired behavior to get the user to choose Audible for listening audio content on the go. And then as the present behavior, I wrote that, for example, getting into interesting audio content other places, like, for example, audio news or music or podcasts, like the competing content. But also other behaviors, like, for example, forgetting about the Audible app and getting stuck because of a certain book, or no time for consuming the audio content.
Okay. Yeah, I have to break that down a little bit, Philip. When the desired behavior, choose Audible as your app of choice when on the go. Oh,
yeah, while listening to the audio content.
Sorry?
When it comes to listening to the audio content.
Correct. So if you see the statement, the way you framed it, it doesn't tell me clearly the moment in which, it doesn't tell me too much about the moment in which the behavior is happening. Because, for example, I am reading it as, I don't know what you're trying to communicate, I could be wrong, but I'm reading it as something like the equivalent of choose plant-based food when having Netflix binges, right? Or choose plant-based food as your go-to sports diet or something like that, which is, it's definitely a clear target behavior change. And it's in the right, it has the right intention, it has the right goal, but in which moment is that happening? Like, are you asking me? So could you describe what the user is doing in that moment in your imagination?
Would it help if I wrote that get the user to engage with Audible app for listening audio when commuting?
Okay, great. So are you talking about the user getting, say he's commuting or they're commuting, are you talking about them, they have this moment of free time, they are in transit, and are you talking about them downloading the app because they like?
No, they already have the app, but they also have other apps that distract them from using the
exactly. So Audible. Open and start using Audible when commuting.
Yeah.
Okay, that's more specific. You see what I mean?
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Great.
I get you.
Great. Because downloading would be at a different point in the funnel, and it would be a totally different kind of behavioral change you're looking at, etc., etc. But here the user has it. That means they have some motivation, etc. You want to trigger them to actually use the app more. All right. Great. And what would be the current behavior?
The current behavior would be to have like, the current behavior would be, for example, the decision stigma between the apps that offer audio content in different forms. that could be like audio news or a podcast or even music.
The stigma is not a behavior, it is the cognitive dissonance or the confusion that's going on in the user. He's basically faced with a lot of different options. It's a state of mind, but what is he currently doing? Is he picking something else? Could we pick that as the current behavior, or is he putting off making a choice entirely?
Choosing a different app, for example, that would be the.
I think that works.
Yeah,
I think that works. Okay, that's a very, very competitive and like proper, you know, real business. That's exactly how Amazon would think. Like, for example, that's how they think. Great, I love it. So please note these down. I'm not noting all your behaviors. So you're building your own canvas. I'm building mine here. Great. All right. Everyone else. Katie, you've been really quiet.
Okay. So I picked the present behavior as currently I've been adding books via Amazon.com based off of like recommendations of a friend or a podcast. And as Audible, from the Audible perspective, I'd say like the desired behavior could be adding books via Audible's app and their recommendations.
So when you say adding a book, are you adding it to your, like, are you buying them, or are you just adding them for consideration?
Actually buying them.
So it's a purchase decision and a purchase behavior. Okay, purchase books from Amazon's recommendation feature. Okay, and what does the user currently do? They are purchasing it based on social recommendations from outside Audible. Okay, why would that be a desirable behavior change for Audible? Because aren't you disrupting a good current behavior for Audible, which is if people purchase stuff through social, that's great. I would like them to purchase stuff through social as well as from the recommendation engine, so I sell more books.
Right. I'm just saying, for me, as the use case, I've never chosen anything off of their like recommended list, and it's not something that I see when I use the app. I just immediately am focused on getting the book that my friend recommended as fast as possible.
That's really interesting. Okay, wow, cool. Please write that down. Okay. Anyone else? See, you need to, in Katie's case, Katie, you need to be a little bit like these kinds of things. You need to be a little bit careful when working with a real project, for example, where you do not want to stop behaviors that are beneficial for business unless there's a clear, user insight to it and so on. It's just my general observation. It totally makes sense.
Yeah, but they they're sponsoring specific books, so they have an agenda to push specific content.
As well, yeah, sounds good. But again, if you look at that viral, pattern that we want users to develop, then it would be really desirable if they actually bought stuff off social recommendations. I'm just questioning if you want to stop that behavior. I'm great with the desired behavior. Makes absolute sense. Very valuable for the company, valuable for the user. It's a win-win. But do you really want to stop that current behavior? Would you rather not stop some other current behavior, which is endlessly browsing without making a purchase or something like that, But you could think about it. There's no stress about it, but I just wanted to leave that as a thought.
Well, cool. You could build that new behavior without necessarily stopping the old one.
Could we build it without stopping the old one?
Right.
Is what I think so. It depends on how we frame it, isn't it? It depends on how we target that behavior. It could be something else that they are doing, which we get them to stop. Like this competitive stuff, for example, or, well, one of the big things people don't do is they just don't open apps enough, which is one of the big behavior changes in any project, is they just don't engage, as Philip said, with the app. So that's something, you know, to kind of always, you can always have an intervention to make more of that happen. Okay, yeah, it all works. Jamie, what did you do?
I need a second. I'm getting in the car. I've got somewhere I gotta go.
Oh,
So,
no worries,
come back.
no worries. Yeah, sure. That's cool. You're driving and taking a class. This is awesome. Super inspiring. Anybody else? Tom?
That's more like dangerous to me. Drive safe, Jamie.
Yeah. Good point.
You got
Yeah, I was working off this kind of like zoning out thing, but I'm not sure if that's like actually a behavior.
Yeah, Jamie was just saying that that's a behavior to stop. Something like that. But yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, Jamie, did you want to say something? Probably not. Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Mhm.
Sorry, I missed that. Wi-Fi dropped out.
Okay.
Yeah, no worries. Was there some prompt for Jamie? I guess not really, no. Yeah, okay, I'll just go. Yeah, I was working off that kind of like zoning out thing, but I'm not sure if that's really a behavior. So like, it's kind of like an automatic thing that happens.
Oh, it is. You could count it as a behavior, like falling asleep. You're not voluntarily doing it, but it is an action that you do. So definitely.
Okay, so the kind of like wider context would be that I'm out shopping and listening to an audiobook, and then there's a lot of stuff going on, so I get distracted from listening. And then after a while, I noticed like, well, wait a minute, I haven't been listening for 5 to 10 minutes or something. And I guess the desired behavior would be not getting distracted, or just not listening to audiobooks in distracting environments, or yeah, I guess those are two things.
Exactly. Tricky one.
So
see what you're trying to do is because we can't detect when exactly this distraction happens, or we haven't figured that one out yet. You're trying to reduce the symptoms that create it. You know, you're trying to work on you're trying to eliminate the context itself. And you're saying, let's just not go there. But that's the reality. The problem is that the user is in that context. They're either tired and they fall asleep, or they're multitasking. Think of parents. You know, there's just no way they can get away from taking care of their kids. If they have young kids and they're home in the evening, it's not something you can just switch off. That's why that becomes it's a really challenging behavior change, the zoning off thing, especially zoning off, because it's happening entirely inside your head. There is no signal to the app that this change has actually happened.
Yeah, so that's why I'm like wondering if it's actually like a behavior that can be targeted here, because it's like pretty automated. It's like a kind of, I don't know, system. If system one can be a behavior, then you know that kind of.
No, Tom, it's a function of system one, but you're still doing it. You see, I mean, you are doing it. I mean, it's not. something you're voluntarily doing, I agree. But I think it's something that can be targeted. Yeah, you're right. It's tricky. It's really tricky. But it is, it's a problem. It's a bit like saying, I'm sorry to say, but it's not the best analogy, but it's a bit like saying an alcoholic saying that I just happen to drink. When Wednesday comes, I just hit the bottle. It's automatic. It's built into me. And then you're like, there is no conscious anyone there, but the addiction or whatever has gone so far that this person just picks up a bottle. And then you could say, oh God, can we target that as a behavior? Because this guy is not even putting any effort into it. It's just happening. But that's exactly where we need to do the work and say, hey, how do we either prevent the person from going there in the first place so it doesn't happen? And I think you're on the right path with this whole change the context thing. So in some ways you're saying you want the user to be in active listening mode. You want to get them to be active listeners or not listen at all, right? And the user is saying, well, the reason I have audiobooks is because I want to listen passively. I want to get little snippets while I take care of my kids and do the gardening and even go to the shop. So it's a very complex one, but I just hang on to it and pick something and say, I don't know if you want to go with not listen to when in the market. This is a very complex one, but yeah, park something, whatever feels good to you. I would pick something like, I would make a note about active listening somewhere on the side, because that's, I think, where we are going. And our trigger would need to be around active listening, I think. But we could say, stop listening to books when playing with children, with your kids, or stop listening to books when you're in the supermarket. Does that second one work for you, Tom? Because shopping and listening, is that where the clash happens usually, or what are you usually doing when this zoning out happens? Like 80,
Yeah,
60,
maybe,
70%.
yeah, something like that. I zone out all the time though.
Yeah, I'm the same. I could be just staring someone in the face and be zoned out. It's unbelievable, to be very honest. And then I have to pull myself back. But okay, let's say shopping for the moment. Put that down. Great. There's only Sia left, I think.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick.
Cool.
I don't know if it still works. So
Time
my
flies.
my desired behavior is I want to actually start the first audiobook, say by the end of June. So it's within weeks. I actually think it's best if I return to the book I already started. So that could be kind of a nice way to get back to it through audiobook. So that's more precise to me as well as some sort of like target behavior that I would like to achieve.
Sorry, could you say it one more time? What's the current behavior?
We haven't gotten to the current behavior yet.
Yeah.
It was all desired behavior. Yeah. Yes. So start an audiobook by the end of June, and it should be a book that I have already begun reading.
Awesome.
Somewhere.
That sounds very nice, specific. Yep.
Yeah. And I can see that as very realistic as well. I actually just found that you can connect Audible and Kindle, which I didn't even know it existed before, but yeah. So
wow.
Yeah, I'm a dinosaur, I don't see those things. But
nobody does. Yeah, lots happen.
I mean, you can find it if it's hidden away in settings under, option number 10. So
see, that's actually terrible behavior design on the part of Amazon, because they haven't surfaced it to you. It's not your job to go hunting through software to find out where the beneficial features are. They should know what you want, what is valuable to you, and they should surface it to you, present it to you in the right context. Absolutely. And say, hey, do you know you can do this? Then users adopt. So yeah, Amazon particularly is terrible generally at UX and kind of pretty bad at behavior, I would say, but they get some things very right. They know things like content and licensing and how to get those user numbers and pricing, delivery. They do some things very well, so they've grown so big, but there's so many gaps in their experience, I think. Same with Google. Anyways, side note, but yeah.
Yeah. Good points though. So look, about the current behavior, there are a few things that can help me get there. So for example, I already have lots of books that I've started on Kindle. I have lots of interesting options to choose from. I read in my free time, usually in traffic. So that could be potentially, and I listen to podcasts, right? Also in the same situations. So I could just try to switch.
While you're driving?
And no, in traffic. I mean, just like say in public transport, or sometimes like trying to get from point A to point B.
In transit, okay, yeah, during commute.
Oh yeah, during
Yeah,
commute.
come on, Sia. We know people. We don't support driving.
I know, right? Jeez, Sia.
Definitely seen it. So
sorry, I'm trying to promote unhealthy habits here. That's okay.
The craziest thing I've ever seen is one fellow consultant. He's a partner at a firm in Helsinki. We were driving to Elisa, the operator, and he finished the last few slides while he was driving. He had the laptop open on his lap, and we were driving, and he was finishing the last few slides. Oh, just amazing!
Crazy.
I even took a picture, and it's on my Facebook wall. You know, I even took a picture and put it on there, like ultra high productivity. But it was pretty loony.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, given Helsinki is a very easy and empty city to drive in, but still. Anyways, go ahead, Sia. Yeah, your current behavior was during transit.
I'm in transit. I'm in transit where I typically listen to podcasts on Spotify. So it's a different platform, right? But we have to take that into account. But I never listen to books. However, I sometimes read books on Kindle app. So it depends, whatever I feel like, and if my headphones still work and if they're still charged and whatnot.
That's a very long current behavior, I must say.
Yeah, okay, but let's just say then let's keep Kindle example. So then it would be reading a book on Kindle, at least one chapter. Actually, let's make it trying to finish one chapter on Kindle, so it's even more precise and that's more realistic.
So your desired behavior is finish a book that you've already started by June.
Continue a book. The desired behavior was start listening to a book in Audible that I'm already reading.
Yes.
So I can progress through it faster.
Yes. And the current behavior is that you do something else on your phone while in transit.
I'm reading a book. So it's not in my ears yet.
Oh, so you want to switch from reading to listening. Simple as that.
Precisely, yeah.
Oh,
but because we have to start with target behavior and then go back to desired behavior, there's a lot of,
That's a brilliant intervention. I love it. Like, unlike in the other case, Katie's case, where there's the slight risk that you lose engagement. And this is my theory. I'm not 100% sure, but it would be something we figure out through experimentation. I think in this case, it makes sense to lose that reading behavior in favor of listening behavior because the user is still with you. You have just switched how they are consuming content from reading to listening, and you're not entirely ending their reading experience. You're not disrupting that permanently. You're just teaching them an additional way to consume content. So they will continue reading, but they also now start doing this listening behavior. And that's like almost directly, see, when you target the behavior so clearly between present and desired, you immediately have interventions. You can literally send a pop-up message saying, are you moving? You could track GPS and say, on the move. You could also listen to this book now. Imagine how cool your app would seem to the user to be like, oh yeah, great. And like, on the move, resume where you stopped reading and just hit play. Boom, and it starts exactly on the paragraph where you stopped reading or the page. That's it. You have a behavioral intervention right there. You don't even need to do the rest of the canvas, really.
Yeah. So, okay, just one question here, right? Because when we talk about intervention, for me, that kind of goes into the area of let's ideate and create solutions, right? And that's where we just got what if the phone did that, or like smartphone did that. Yeah. But I mean, aren't we in the target space, which basically doesn't consider any ideas?
I am absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That ideas come in the third part of the canvas, but I'm saying when your behavioral targeting is very, very sharp, the ideas start to already flow. You know, it's a good sign when your ideas start to bubble out. That means you have seeded your mind correctly with enough input so that you're starting to generate ideas. So I'm saying that's a good sign of good behavioral targeting. When behavioral targeting is not specific, for example, in Tom's case, and it's not specific because it's so tricky, this whole zoning out thing, can you consider it a behavior? It happens, but is it a behavior? It's kind of, you know, the ideas are not jumping out. How on earth do we stop it? You see, there's a sign already that at this stage that you can see that you're doing targeting. So targeting is really important. And I think we're actually done with targeting. And I wanted to quickly, you know, as usual, we're running out of time. But before we get into motivational alignment, I wanted to quickly show you a case. Okay, doesn't matter. I'll come back to this later. Well, we've done with targeting. Let's jump into motivational alignment. And that's the second half, the second part of the canvas, I'm sorry. Where basically, if you remember this, can someone tell me what this is and where it comes from and what it's trying to explain? By now, you guys should know this in your sleep.
Fogg's one, right?
Yes. What is it? Yeah, what's it called, Ines? Fogg?
The Fogg's model?
Yeah, Fogg's behavior model.
Okay.
Okay, and what does it tell us, or what is it trying to say?
Well, I mean, I can cheat from the slide. It's about motivation and
sure.
ability.
Yes, sure. That's why the slide is there. No worries. But if you had to explain it really simply in 2 minutes to a class, you know, a room full of people, your colleagues, you're presenting Fogg's model and you want to give them a quick idea, what would you tell them about this?
What would I tell them? I would tell them that for triggers to succeed, you have to have high enough level of motivation and high enough level of ability.
Mm-hmm. Great. That sounds good. Anyone else has another take on it? What is the trigger though? Then they will say, but what's a trigger? What do you mean triggers to succeed?
So a trigger is something that prompts action?
Yes. So I think the simple explanation, the 2-minute explanation is it's a model about how behavior happens. Any behavior. And you need 3 elements for behavior to happen. They are trigger, motivation, and ability, or motivation, ability, and trigger. That's why the model is called B is equal to MAT. It's a recipe of ingredients required for behavior. That's what the model is. Then, of course, it shows you the mechanics of how it works, which is what you described, right? So the big thing here is actually motivation. I mean, it's also the others, but what basically I did was I took this model and I visualized it. And I said, if you have present behavior, you have a desired behavior, for this desired behavior to happen, just like Mr. Fogg has told us, we're going to need something called motivation. And we're going to need something called ability. The 2 key ingredients first on the 2 axes, right? This axis and this axis. So I split them up and I put them here and said, let's look at the intent or the motivation. This intent is another word for motivation. Is the human motivated to do the target behavior? And then if they are, if it's a yes, it's a conditional box, then you need to amplify the ability. Enabler, ability, same word. Enable, ability. Enabler comes from ability. So increase the enabler and trigger the behavior. But if they're not, because It's not always the case that they're not sufficiently motivated. You need to amplify motivation first, then your route becomes this way. You have an extra step. Does that make sense? And that's why this part is called align, because you're basically trying to align the behavior that you want the user to do. You're trying to align it with their existing motivation, or you're trying to add more motivation, because without that motivation, the behavior is not going to happen. Well, in Tom's case, this is where again things get very complicated, right? So that's where I was trying not to go too quickly, but what's the motivation of the user to zone out? Is there any intent on the user's part to zone out? It's a complicated question. But in all the rest of your cases, I think you can find the motivation quite easily. So that's the second part for you guys to fill out, is this second part, which is user intent. But again, I have a lot of tooltips. I have a lot of things to consider for these three boxes. So anyone remember this? Again, you need to explain this quickly to your colleagues in 2 minutes. What is it, guys? We touched upon it twice, but I don't hold anything against you because I read these many, many times before I internalize them. I do not expect that you just know it, but you have to start getting used to knowing this like very, very comfortably and easily.
The shifting in habits.
Yes, actually it was in gamification and habits, I think.
Is this is like Amy Bucher's from that book Engaged or something, and it's about motivation levels or something like that?
Exactly. It's not levels. It is from Amy Bucher's Engaged book, which I recommend you get. But it's not about levels. It's about the spectrum of motivation. So all motivation, this model says that all motivation either is controlled or is autonomous. That means you're doing it because you have an external or an extrinsic source that's driving you to do the behavior, or you're doing it out of an integrated intrinsic source. Things you enjoy doing, things you find enriching, things you find empowering. No one needs to externally motivate you to go to the sauna. It's just so freaking awesome that you just do it. You spend money and time doing it. Same with, I don't know what else you love to do, gardening, I guess, something else. But walking the dog, yes, it may be enjoyable, but it's also driven by the dog's need to be relieved. You don't want to soil your home, etc. So it's a spectrum of motivation. This model will also give you a lot of input for the second part of the canvas. When you start considering this stuff here, you can think of, oh, is it internal? Is the motivation intrinsic? Is it extrinsic? Right? So that's this box. Just stop me if I'm anything not
practical
making sense.
Question.
Yeah.
If you could go back to align part of the canvas.
Yes.
With use human motivated to do target behavior, you mean on which scale practically is that person in terms of motivation, isn't it?
Where they are on that scale is one way to look
more
at
complicated.
it.
Yeah.
No, it need not be. I think you should keep it very simple. The theories are complicated, but we need to use them as designers and keep them very simple. That's why we are designers, not academics. So yeah, make it really simple. Where on that scale? So let's take an example. What's your case is you're trying to target behavior between reading, you want to switch them to listening, right? Mm-hmm. Is the human motivated to do that behavior? Let's look at. So this is clear. You need motivation, enough motivation for the behavior to happen. So this is the model that explains that.
Mhm.
Fine. Now how much motivation and what quality of motivation does the user have? This model will help us explain that. In this case, you.
Mm.
So would you say that when in that moment when you are reading and you want to switch to listening, where on the scale would you place yourself?
It's like all the way to the right, all good. Super intrinsic pops out.
That sounds very good. You
So
see,
yeah.
But for example, if it was a student who is reading because he needs to give an exam, not very intrinsic. Annoying punishment is the cost of not reading.
Yeah.
So you see, the quality of motivation there is very different. It's motivated by fear of failure, motivated by recognition in school, motivated by getting external rewards. No one loves exams.
See, that's why I'm asking, because the question on the Canvas is there enough motivation to proceed to the target behavior, which is basically answer yes or no. But then, for example, if I were to use the Canvas, or if I were to use it with another person, it's basically facilitating. If I start asking is it or does it, I won't get any, like, what do I even put in there? What will help me? Basically, what I'm trying to understand is with user intent, even though we are trying to progress through the Canvas and get to the next level of yes or no, what potentially is the discussion we're having on the user intent, say? Because people probably won't know those scales of motivation, right? We are supposed to know, but we can't expect others to know that.
Well, that's where your research and your understanding of the user comes in. And that's where, like in your case, for example, you see, that's where you become very specific with the kind of user, with the target user, the target context. And I agree that this is actually a scale. This yes and no is not binary. It's not black and white. It's actually something from yes to a complete no. But there's no way to visually represent that. You can't put 10 boxes here and start getting really granular. I'm saying these are the two cases that you need to design for. You're either in one case or you're in the other. Because again, if you look at this thing, you need sufficient motivation. You need a certain amount of motivation before triggers and ability can come together and for the behavior to happen. And so that's what we're trying to get at. We're trying to broadly get at, is the user motivated enough? Then it's a yes. If they are not, then we need to fix that problem. So in your case, both in your case and in the student's case, actually, the answer is yes, because like you said, it's intrinsic for you, reading, you enjoy it, you're clearly in this top box. And what you need to do is amplify the ability first. You need to check if the user has the ability. They maybe have the ability and they maybe have the trigger, but you need to check. And in the case of the student as well, actually, I think the motivation is there. His motivation is a different motivation. It's not intrinsic, it's extrinsic, because he needs to study for the exam, but it's still there. Then there could be a third case where a user actually has no motivation. So what the Canvas basically helps you do is it checks, it's a big hygiene check on what exactly are you targeting for whom and why, and why is it working or not working. It's a breakdown. Because you could easily, if you didn't have a method like this, you could easily be targeting someone who's not motivated and not even know it. Why is my trigger not working? Why is my pop-up not working? People put pop-ups in their apps all the time. It doesn't work. So then the question is, in order to go deeper into your point, what is the behavioral signal? Because I can't ask the user, are they motivated? Like you said, could I learn from some other behavior of theirs? Could I see if they have opened the app a certain number of times in the last week or so? Could I see if they have been reading books connected to a certain topic? Could I see if they trigger the app at a certain time over and over? This is where behavior design becomes entirely about like this kind of working with the black room, the black box, because you actually never ever going to know exactly what goes on in the mind. Neuromarketing, and there are some techniques now which are trying to read, brain activity and stuff, but I think we're still very far away from knowing, is Sia motivated in this moment or not? We can only go with a hypothesis. We can say, well, Sia seems to be reading every day and she's reading a lot of books on biology. So she seems to be fairly motivated to read biology and understand biology. Plus she seems to be traveling. So why don't we try to trigger her? We are having an assumption of motivation. But you have to start somewhere. Yeah, and it gets really detailed, no doubt about it. So I guess what you guys should do, I have more, but you can look at the motivation class. This is where the theory starts to become really useful, right? You did this in motivation class. You looked at something called valence. You looked at an arousal. You studied these two states basically where, you can have like high or low valence, and you can have high or low arousal. These are all states of mind. You could target any of these states of mind. So if you start looking at saying, what if I design for a calm and peaceful state of mind? A calm and peaceful. The user is motivated, but they are in a calm and peaceful state of mind. Could I create an intervention for that? Or if they are in one of these negative states, could I create an intervention that helps them out of that? So once you start working on that motivation piece, all the tools start to become useful. And it's really a question of framing and reframing, moving around, using different perspectives to get closer to the truth. That's the process.
In your experience, Ash, when you're using this canvas, how are you running through, and are you giving people this kind of prompts to understand what motivation is and what are the varieties of it? How does it typically work?
I see you. That's the thing. It's like you work as a design thinker, right, Sia? So let's say I come to you and the client comes to you and they have a project. You have some tacit knowledge which is impossible to explain, because you've done it enough for a while to know if this project needs some user insight now, or does it need a UX review, or do you want to look at the service journey? Do you think you need better user insight on specific type of user? How do you know which to pick? You just know it because you've done it enough, and you try something, right? You go with your best guess. And so I pick from any of these motivational models. It really depends on the case. Another thing which is very closely tied to motives is rewards, because actually what you're motivated towards is a reward. It's the outcome or the payoff, as we said in choice design. So I try to look at rewards. I try to look at payoffs. I try to look at intrinsic, extrinsic. I try to look at valence. It really is like using a lot of different lenses to try to examine what could work, what could be a fit here, and try something and not confuse the others, and get them to work on it. So it's a collaborative process. It really depends on the case. But the cool thing about the process is once you've done the whole thing, you know how you got somewhere. You've designed an intervention with a clear rationale behind it. If it doesn't work, you know that does not work. You know that some of your hypotheses don't work. You know that some of your assumptions are wrong. If you don't have that path, then you just design something and it didn't work, and it's like, why didn't it work? Why did we even get here? So that's what design thinking in general kind of misses, is it's a very generative sort of a process. And it says you have user insight and you brainstorm, and from there you distill some insights, and then you turn insights into design. But like, that's not deep enough. Sure, you can connect the link, you can connect the design back to the insight, but it doesn't really get into the behavior. and the reasons for that behavior. It's a very laborious process, no doubt about it, but that's why it's very specialized as a field, and it's so slowly taking off. It's not something like which everyone's just doing. It's because it takes years to understand it and get good at it, I would assume. And then the sooner we start and the further we are. Cool. Awesome. So now it's your turn to write down. I have a lot of different, well, you've kind of touched upon all of these in the classes so far. Is the human motivated to do the target behavior? We look at those kind of peak motivation moments that we discussed in motivation class. You look at, are you being pushed or pulled? Are you looking at intrinsic, extrinsic, just the same stuff that the models I showed you, you take all those inputs. Amplifying target behavior is about, you can look at a number of things, but do they have the ability, basically? Do they have the ability to do the behavior, which is, do they have the opportunity to do it? Do they feel like the user has the agency to do it? Do they have the resources, mind, time, money, the fingers, the eyesight, the physical resources? You need so many things. And then also like novelty. Is it new enough? Is it interesting enough? You can consider any of these. And then finally, the last one, if you don't have motivation, if it's a task, which is what we discussed in gamification, it's just, God, I gotta do this because it's necessary. Then you need to start adding those motivators, using persuasion, changing their belief, or gamifying. So the next step of your exercise, which would be probably the last for today because I don't want to keep you longer, is to write down your motivator. Does it exist for your target behavior? Not your current behavior, but for your desired behavior. Sometimes they can be the same motivator, sometimes they can be different, but what is the motivation? And is it, if it's there, if it's sufficient, or if it's like a positive, then what would be the ability you would need to add? Or leverage. They might already have it. Cool. All right, quick 5 minutes exercise. Any questions? Just feel free to ask. Ines looks so serious. I'm worried.
Not at all.
Cool.
Ready.
Awesome. Wow, you already did it? Awesome.
Yeah.
Katie looks like she's done as well. No. Katie, you always look like you're just, you got it. No worries. So chill. Which is probably true. Yeah, Katie and Jamie, when they got in touch, they'd already been reading lots of behavior design books, some which I had not read. And I think we've been having a good sparring collaboration. I'll go into the specifics of abilities next time. Well, Fogg has a list of them. I could also post them, but I didn't want to just keep dumping stuff on you. Okay, guys, let's go for it. Unfortunately, because we don't have time. Ines could start.
Okay, so I did think, of course, of some scenarios where the user intent would be no.
Yeah.
But I focused the ones on the yes, because the no is maybe you don't want to share because you're in general private person and don't want to share
Yes.
A lot on social media and things like this. So I figured this kind of person is more of an agnostic, so we don't want to push there. The other one was maybe you don't want to share because book wasn't really worth recommending or it wasn't good. So we in a way, being Amazon, wouldn't want to push towards that neither. I would rather have it be something like you share the good books because this is kind of like a book club and you're creating your.
That's a very interesting point. That's a very interesting point. But have you just considered that sharing a book that is not good is also really beneficial for others because they know what not to buy. It's valuable.
Yeah.
And of course, Amazon loses a sale, but could they then say buy this instead or something? Just a thought.
Maybe, yeah. But also, like, if you think traditionally people are in like book clubs and sharing books, they're not too much sharing like do not
books.
Book, never.
Sure.
More sharing like this is a good one.
Exactly. So it's more like a rating function. The rating kind of does that job of kind of pegging where the book's at, like how good it is. Good point. Great. Yeah, go ahead.
So I focused on the yeses. So I think the yeses could be, I want to share it with others because this helps me with kind of networking with other like-minded people, showing off kind of my knowledge that I have acquired by reading the book. And maybe also, you want to share it because you also want it to be reciprocated in a way that you also want to learn about good books among your friends or others who might comment on that saying, hey, I read on this topic too. This book is also awesome, or start a conversation.
Right. That's a great way to say it because actually I remember I should put something else on the canvas, which is what is the core motivator or motivators? It's not just is the human motivated. That's the decision for the process in the canvas, but then you need to write down what is the core motivator clearly, which is what you've done, even though I didn't say it. But so which one would you pick to go with? Social rewards or personal rewards, intrinsic rewards?
I think that was the networking one. So I don't have now the slide that had it, but it was like.
So would you say that the user is a little bit in a professional context when they're doing this? It doesn't apply so much to bedtime storybooks, say, or.
Yeah, in this case, I am talking in that way, but I guess it works with kind of like bedtime storybooks too. If you really like I don't know, Lord of the Rings, you also want to share that in a sense.
But would the motivator be to network?
With other like-minded people who like similar books, perhaps something similar to that people will then comment on.
Sounds great. So you're trying to leverage a strong, powerful social motivator here.
Yeah.
And you're saying the benefit or the motivator would be to network. We'll just use that word for the moment. Great. Sounds good. Very good. And did you think of what ability you need to amplify, or is there ability already?
I actually don't know if in Audible you can share, but I mean, I guess it's quite simple in a way that.
Sorry, I didn't explain. So it's not the feature. It is, does the user have the mental, do they have the time? Do they have if the behavior takes money, then do they have money? Is it new enough? Is it interesting? Is it new? Do they have the ability? Do they have the cognitive skills to do it? Are you good on that? Because basically, again, going back to this beautiful diagram, if you don't have enough ability on that bottom scale, your triggers are not going to work.
Yeah.
You need, So it's a check, but depending on the behavior, you might need to be very careful and see if the ability is there. But in your case, it seems like they have the time, it's free, it's easy to do. I mean, it can be fairly easy to do. It's not cognitively difficult. It's not physically difficult. It's pushing a button or doing some kind of an in-app behavior. They probably have the eyesight. They probably have all the abilities required. The ability is not a deal breaker, right? But there are cases where you want to check on that and see if they have the ability. Great. So then, if you've got that, you've got. So of course, remember the second part is the amplification. You need to make sure the ability is enough. So either they have it, or you capture what's there and you make a kind of detailed note about that. So you're sure that it's above the so-called action line.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Awesome. So you're done with the second part. Great. Someone else? Philip?
I was about to say, I need some more time. I need to rethink a few things that I wrote.
No problem at all. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I need to run right now because
No
I have
problem.
actually another appointment soon.
Cool. We'll take it up from here next week if it's okay, guys. One other person can share and we'll take it up from here so Philip does not miss anything.
Thank you. It was
Of course.
for today.
Great. Enjoy your appointment. Take care. Yes. So someone else? If you guys all need to run, also let me know. I don't have a problem. Katie, did you have or anything, or Tom?
Yeah, I can try.
Go for it.
So, I would say for me, I am not motivated. So, and
This
the
was, sorry, could
reasoning-
you remind us of your current and desired behavior?
Oh, so the present behavior is that I'm purchasing Audible books on the Amazon website.
Yes.
And the desired behavior is that instead I would add books via their recommendations in the app.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
So I think at the current state, I'm not motivated, and I think part of it is the ability. Like on BJ Fogg's scale, there's, I think, there's low ability, and then on the motivation side, it's like medium. I think like for motivation, I think suggested content can either be a good experience or bad. For example, like on Netflix, I feel like they've done a good job getting suggestions to me. But on other platforms, I feel like, why are they suggesting this to me? So I think there's just a hesitancy, like I'm in the middle, like this could be good or it could be bad. And then the ability is just, I'm never really on the view of the app where it's giving me suggestions in the first place.
Yes.
So
yes, exactly. Sorry, great point. And it also comes back to Ines's point about this whole feature thing. Ability is also obviously, like Katie just said, it's also obviously having the feature to be able to do it, right? I mean, you can have all the cognitive bandwidth and the time in the world, but if you don't have the actual button or feature, you don't have the ability. So it's not sufficient enough, right? You also need to keep that in mind, but anyway, we designed that feature in the next part of the canvas where we shape the behavior. But I think Katie's analysis is just fine, just perfect.
Okay.
Great. So you're not motivated and you don't have the ability.
Correct.
Or you're low on motivation and you don't have the ability. Right. So then did you think of how you would amplify the motivation there? I know it's a lot of work in 5 minutes, but did you have any thoughts?
So would you mean amplifying the
Because-
medium motivation that I have, or?
Correct. Like if you take yourself as the user, basically you're in this box now. Here, no, amplify motivation. You need sufficient motivation for you to do the behavior, and only then will that ability work, right? You
Okay.
need both those elements. You can give the user all the ability in the world, but if they not interested, they're basically motivated, right? They're somewhere on this, they're somewhere here.
Okay.
I have no desire to do this. You need to move them further down the scale on the right. And you could start with something extrinsic. That's what gamification does, like we discussed. Creates these points, creates these, interesting goals and stuff, rewards and stuff out there, extrinsic rewards, which make you want to do the behavior, gets you motivated. Or then you can go all the way and tap into something that's really enjoyable and intrinsic to the user. So that would be your first task on the canvas, because you are here. So do you have any thoughts on how you could make this unmotivating behavior more motivating?
I feel like it's like I need to be persuaded, like the persuasion option.
Sounds
that
great.
I can trust their suggestions.
That's fantastic. So what logical appeal are you, what appeal are you using if you want to trust, if Audible wants you to trust their recommendation? Do you remember the 3 appeals? Persuasive appeals.
Ethos.
Yes, exactly. Ethos is credibility. So that's where that theory comes to use. Excellent work, Katie. Wow. Because doing the no route is really hard. Even just knowing and being bold enough to go and to do persuasion, like motivation work, is terribly hard. Because in general, as a rule of thumb, don't try to motivate people when they're not motivated. It's generally very expensive and hard. Of course, there are some cases where you absolutely want to do it. Political lobbyists, environmental activists, human rights activists, they do this every day. And that's why their work is so cognitively hard. You're going against people's natural motivation. The easy route is always to pick motivation that's already there and simply amplify the ability. That's why Fogg personally is a big advocate of ability. He says, he doesn't touch motivation. He talks about tiny habits, something that's easy and fun to do and build up over time and change behavior over time. But that way he leaves out all of persuasion, gamification. He leaves out all this awesome stuff in the no box. And I want to be inclusive of that as well. I don't want to leave that out. I think that's also behavior change work. So great, you're going to go with persuasion. You're going to persuade Katie to actually purchase books through the recommendation engine. And you're going to do it by building credibility around the recommendations. Really cool. Great. And then do they have the ability? I mean, I know they don't have the ability, but have you thought about ability already? A little bit or anything?
Like I'm thinking about it with the lens of features. Is that okay? So I think well, right now I don't think you can purchase through the app. If I understand it, you have to purchase on their website. So if they allow you to purchase through the app, then you now have real estate there around the purchase to make suggestions. Because on Amazon's website, they're so broad, you can go to Amazon and buy anything. But for the app, it's Audible and it's very specific to what you're looking at in that moment. You're looking for an audiobook.
Sounds good. Great. And then, so you've thought of that, and that sounds pretty good. You're ready to get to the next phase. And Tom, Sia? Tom, maybe go for it. just picking.
I think Tom goes. Look, guys, I need to jump as well.
All right.
I need to get on the road now.
This is all
thank
recorded.
you.
So what I'll do is I'll just put this online and you guys can catch up on this last 10-15 minutes. Perfect.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you,
Have a
Ash.
good
Thank you,
one.
others.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we can just do this later.
Yeah.
How are you guys doing for time?
Yes, good question.
I'm okay.
Cool.
All right. Well, I'll just get it over with, I guess.
Yeah, I'll put the recording so the guys can watch it. And
Yeah. So again, my desired behavior change was to stop listening to audiobooks in distracting environments. And I'm not really motivated to do that. Like there's kind of like two things working here. Is like one is I kind of want to save time, which is why I'm doing it, right? So I want to like read, listen to books, like use my time effectively.
Exactly.
But then, and I want to kind of like finish the book ASAP to get all the learnings in.
Yes.
Because obviously, if I was like listening to it just for like, you know, wanting to focus on this like beautiful reader's wonderful velvety voice, then I would just like, you know, cordon off some time to do it. Yeah, so I'm not really like, I think, motivated to stop that. So I'm kind of like in the no box in there. So some ways to kind of get me into the yes box, I guess, is reframing the situation. So I have this like belief that like I can still finish the book really quickly if I listen to them in these distraction environments. But I think if I was able to kind of understand that it's actually kind of counterproductive, you know, it's like multitasking where I'm not really doing anything
Right. Wow.
efficiently.
Tom, this is so AI. Believe me, it's so freaking AI. Yeah, this is the future, man. If we crack this as a real design problem, I mean, this would be amazing.
Yeah, well,
this
so
is cognitive stuff.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
so there's like a couple of ways to do that, I guess.
Oh,
like
wow. Okay.
could have some kind of pop quizzes that would then like, you know, help me understand that like, wait a minute, I didn't really get any of this stuff. But then I'd have to like self-reflect and be like, so hold up, what was my behavior leading to this kind of pop quiz thing, and be like, oh, okay, I did better last time because I wasn't listening in distracting environments, and now this happened. Or, you know, you could have this like
I also have it. Yeah,
utilize some kind of AI thing that's actually kind of tracking your like using our balance tech, for example, to check your behavior. Like, oh, you're in these like busy environments while listening to the audiobook, and it seems like you're going back a lot.
Yes.
In the audiobook, like jumping back when you're in this busy environment, so it could give this kind of like little.
I actually have a really interesting intervention as well. Oh my god, it's so interesting. Yes,
But
yes.
Yeah.
Which one are you leaning towards? The pop quiz or the? I like both, to be very honest.
Well, the pop quiz thing to me feels a little bit more. It doesn't require like a huge tech development thing or anything.
That is true.
And it feels more of a like one of these kind of, I don't know, gamifying persuasion. I don't know. It's not really any of those.
Yeah,
but it's like reframing a little bit.
Well, it's a sort of gamification, actually, if you think about it, because a quiz is essentially a challenge. You're challengifying the situation, and you're turning it into there's a reward that comes out of answering right, and so it's a gamification, you could say, if it's done kindly and nicely, not like a test that makes you feel bad, then it's not enjoyable again, right? So the beautiful thing about your case is that it's a great example of how behavior design often is about clash of motivations. And interventions are getting to good interventions is about resolving motivational clashes. The meta thing about motivation is that we have many contexts in which we have conflicting motivations. I want to listen to a book. That's one agent in your head that wants to maximize productivity or learning. And the other agent is, I also want to get shopping done. We have this multi-threaded process going on in our head. You might have a social motivation also going on in the space where you want to, I don't know, be present with someone else, or wish the shopkeeper because the teller because you go there, say hi, how are the kids, whatever. That's another motivation, right? And Tom is thinking that. So it's a great example of how. So by adding a quiz, you're adding yet another cognitive layer to it. Like, not only am I listening a book and I'm shopping, now you want me to take a freaking quiz and test me. So I think it's an effective intervention for your goal, but it is cognitively, you're turning the situation, making it so heavy that you're just you're making the quality of the experience come down. So that's the risk of going with the test. I think the other one, AI-driven stuff, which is not that advanced. I mean, it's not that difficult, but it's smarter. It's more subtle. I had a couple of other suggestions. One was, what if, two variations of the same, what if we repeated the same paragraph over and over? And basically build in an audio-based check that tests if the user is listening or not, or just cut to another book or podcast randomly from time to time when they're really in a crowded place. You just cut to a few lines of something else and then put a pop-up there saying, notice anything different, to test if the user is paying attention. And if they're not, then you know they've zoned out. And then you pause it and say, hey, we actually changed the book 2 minutes ago. It looks like you didn't pay attention. You want to go back a couple pages?
Yeah, nice shamification.
It's done right. It's not shamification. It's just hopefully just like a helpful, it's not even a nudge, but it's kind of like a helpful feature that keeps you on track. We've got you, you know, busy day, we've got you.
Yeah, that's kind of, well, yeah, it depends on how it would detect that. Like, if it does have that AI that detects where you are and then kind of turns on that mode.
Exactly.
But if it's always on, then it can be a little bit counterproductive as well.
For sure, it has to be done very carefully.
Maybe I'd like to challenge the whole distraction principle behind it, because I feel like I am able to zone out without any distraction whatsoever.
Yeah, right.
I could be sitting on my couch and listening to a podcast and I can still zone out. So maybe if you're working on a problem about zoning out, it doesn't need to have any kind of distraction, busy element to it.
Right. Yep. It's a tricky one.
Well, for that, the quiz would work nicely, I think. And it would solve the problem that you have is after you zoned out or fell asleep or whatever, you don't know where you left off. So in a way, if it was kind of like a quiz thing, it could take you back to like the beginning of whichever period.
This is a brilliant discussion. I love it. Not only that, also I think you can combine all of this with much better user insight questions. For example, when you're using apps, we often see this kind of rather silly message, how do you rate this app? It's so vague. What context are you talking about? Rated for what? Especially when so many complex things happen, right, within an app. So you just put a 3 or 4 or whatever number of stars on a 5-star and you say next and you're back. And actually the app doesn't get any real insight. But what if you said something like, checking in on your listening habits. Do you zone out often? Do you tend to zone out often, sometimes, never? Skip. You can skip the question, go right back, but motivated users will get engaged to that question and say, oh yeah, I do. Sometimes, then follow up with another question. Only 2 questions, don't kill them. Let's say, I zone out usually when I'm out in busy environments, at home on the couch, just before I sleep. And then you can start,
all of the above.
and all of the above. Oh my God. So, Ines, you're definitely the user to design for. I think if we design this for you, we're gonna win the entire market. That's it. We're getting closer to behavior design. I mean, we are doing it basically. So that's a great discussion. And did we discuss yours, Ines? We did. Yeah. First. Yeah. Awesome. Let's call it a day. And I hope the guys catch up with this last 20 minutes or so. And we'll take off exactly from here. So I'm happy I didn't rush it today and just went at the pace that was required. We'll continue on the same case the next time and try to do more cases and then add some theory about personality, etc.
Nice.
Cool. Awesome stuff. Great. So as homework, if you feel like putting these insights on a digital canvas, that'll get you started on building canvases and in the tool of your choice, and that'll get you into a workflow which you can then reuse for your projects as well. I do have a Miro canvas I can share with you, but it's basically a bunch of boxes and text, so very easy to recreate.
Okay.
Nice. Did you publish it in the Miro marketplace?
Nah, haven't had the time, Tom. Maybe someday.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for the lesson or course. Awesome. Or whatever this is.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for your presence and your awesome ideas and work. So take care, guys, and see you next week. But I'll see you online on Slack.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.